Support for Carolina Business Review provided by Grant Thornton. Operating in more than 100 countries, our tax, audit, and advisory professionals specialize in helping companies unlock their growth potential. Blue Cross and Blue Shield of South Carolina, where healthcare is changing for the better. Find out how at ahealthysc.tv. And by Sunoco, a global manufacturer of consumer and industrial packaging products and provider of packaging services, with more than 300 operations in 35 countries.
While you were out this past summer, it seems that our economy and our business continue to cook along and expand. Welcome back to school and back to the most widely watched source of Carolina business and public policy. I'm Chris William. And outside of a big concern, namely unemployment, commerce has been growing. A little unevenly, but been growing. We will chat about those policy and business issues that affect us most. And later on, the CEO of North Carolina-based the State Employee Credit Union, Jim Blaine, soon.
Major funding also by Novant Health, bringing you world-class technology, clinicians, and care when and where you need it. The Duke Endowment, a private foundation enriching communities in the Carolinas through higher education, healthcare, rural churches, and children's services. And by Blue Cross and Blue Shield of North Carolina. Who's responsible for rising healthcare costs? Join us and many others in a candid discussion at letstalkcost.com. This edition of Carolina Business Review was recorded August 23, 2013. On this week's program, Russell Stoll of Greenville Forward, Dr. Peter Summers of High Point University, and special guest Jim Blaine, President and CEO of the State Employees Credit Union. And now, here's Chris William.
Hello, welcome to our program. Welcome back to school, guys.
Well, thanks. Thank you.
I don't know that I'm ready for the summer to be over, but it is nonetheless. Russell, we're gonna start with you. Unemployment. You know, I don't want to bang the table about this, and I think we're all kind of tired of hearing and reading about it. Maybe that's why it's worth saying again. But it seems like unemployment in the Carolinas is the elephant in the room. In North Carolina, the rate is ticked back up close to 9%. Yep. And this is 5 years after 2008, which was, the beginning of really some dark days. In South Carolina, it's ticked up back to 8.1%. So how do you answer the question of unemployment? How do we get around this? How do we get that number back down?
Well, when we look at what's happening in the upstate and the rest of the Carolinas, we're really interested in not just the unemployment rate, but we're also very interested in making sure that our jobs are high-quality jobs. We're very interested in making sure that employment is the right employment, and that we're creating good and new jobs for people that are moving in and people that are there. We've been a little bit insulated as far as the unemployment rate. Our economy has been good. We haven't seen a downturn as much as, I don't think, other parts of the country and other parts of the region. And so it's been good for us.
Yeah. Peter, I got to ask you the same question. You know, you're squarely in the triad, squarely in close to the center of the state, and in a state that has top 5 unemployment rate in this nation. In North Carolina, for many years, was very proud of the fact that development was good, that economic development was strong, but yet here we are with this dubious honor of 8.9% unemployment and maybe going higher.
Well, that's right. And I think when you look at employment growth and unemployment, in not just in the triad, but in the Carolinas more broadly, over the last couple of years, it's really gone as the national economy has gone. Things have been, I've heard the phrase, just kind of grinding along. We've got growth that is steady, but just not fast enough to get that unemployment rate down. If you look at the national unemployment rate, yes, it's ticked down a bit over the last couple of months, but it remains elevated. It's coming down much more slowly than anyone would like. And if you look at the North or South Carolina statewide unemployment rates, it's pretty much the same thing. I mean, there are a couple of fluctuations month to month, but the general pattern has pretty much tracked along with the national unemployment rate. And I think,
I'm sorry, Peter, not to interrupt you, but
No, sure.
am I overplaying this? I mean, shouldn't we be worried about these kind of unemployment rates? 9% of the people close to 9% of the people in North Carolina don't have a job. Over 8% in South Carolina don't have a job. And I'm not coming from a policy standpoint. I'm coming from just a clinical standpoint to say this is a real monkey wrench in the works.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, when you talk about that level of unemployment, I mean, it has tremendous negative impacts on, obviously, the people that are directly affected, the ones that can't find jobs, but then their families, their neighborhoods. There's been a lot of evidence that, especially persistent unemployment, those who have been out of work for, say, 6 months or more, those people run the risk of becoming unemployable. And if those, to the extent that there are, say, neighborhoods or areas of the state or the region where that sort of unemployment is very high, that can have a very persistent negative effect, long-term effect on that region's economic prospects.
And Russell, to loop it by kind of back around to what you said, I hear what you say about the upstate being a little bit insulated. I mean, some of the development clearly that has gone has been pretty stellar in the upstate and the low country in South Carolina. But still we have businesses, Michelin, BMW, and all the ancillary businesses around this upstate saying that, yeah, we have a skills gap. Yeah. We need people, and we can't find people, and it seems to counter exactly what we're talking about.
I think there's absolutely a skills gap, and we've seen a transition the last decade or so of going from our textile heritage, pure manufacturing, to evolving into an economy that is based on higher skilled jobs and the need for higher skill workers, and there's a gap. I mean, that brings into the importance of our technical school system. I think we have one of the best in the country. The county council just voted to create a
Greenville
innovation.
County?
Greenville County Council just voted to create a enterprise high school, which is an innovation high school that the technical system is going to run, and we've got to have that. I mean, there's just giant holes in workforce training and workforce development.
Okay, well, let me push back a little bit on this, Russell. So where do you apply pressure on that? Do you show up on the steps of the State House in Columbia? Do you show up at corporate headquarters? I mean, who needs to hear this the most?
Yes, both. It's a public policy issue. It's a issue of our local governments and state government. It's our businesses sharing their voice. So it's all. It's not just one group that should be responsible for that.
Yeah, Pete, same question. I mean, is this policy, or is this just the economy needs to work itself through?
Well, I think it's a bit of both. The sort of recession that we had starting in 2007, being accompanied as it was by a banking financial crisis, there's a lot of empirical evidence that suggests those types of recessions tend to take longer to recover from. So there is, some of that, the nature of the beast, if you like. There has been certainly some policy elements of that. Early on in the beginnings of the recession, we had the federal stimulus program, the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act, but at the same time that was kind of ramping up. Most state and local governments were having to cut back because of the drop in tax revenues, so you had basically offsetting fiscal policy. Since the beginning of the year, we've had the federal budget sequestration affecting the entire country. And that the Carolinas are obviously no exception to that. Laying off of or furloughing of public sector employees. We've seen declines in state level government in both North and South Carolina, and that is a policy decision that is a bit frustrating because that's one that's easy to reverse.
But we can't just sit back and let it happen, and we have to be proactive about it. We can't just let things work themselves out.
So what does that mean, Russell?
I think it's a grassroots initiative where the voices of the people need to be heard, both at the corporate level and at the government level. We need to hold our politicians more accountable. We did a survey fairly recently, and one of the results was 14% of people in our area don't trust our politicians.
Okay, so
that's dangerous.
Well, and you know, we've all heard that, and everyone will agree with that, except we'll all say, yeah, but not my representative. Yeah. So does that mean that Trey Gowdy or Mick Mulvaney, does that mean that those guys need to change what they're doing? Does that mean that they're not trusted? Or Tim Scott, the new senator, or Lindsey Graham?
I don't know. It's a tough question. I'm certainly not going to call one of the individuals out. I think it's just generally the general sense of our local folks is not good.
Yeah, Pete, you look like you were going to say something on that.
Well, I think I would certainly agree with. I was talking about the effects of federal sequestration and things like that, and I think that that you're right. That one of the problems is that a lot of the most affected people or programs tend to be ones that fly under the radar. They don't get the headlines. I mean, we saw this in the early days of the sequester, that people were talking about how kids were being turned away from Head Start, or schools were having to furlough teachers, and that was just kind of low-level background noise. But when Congress adjourned and realized that some of the air traffic controllers were going to have to be furloughed, and they were higher profile running into delays on that. Well, that got fixed very quickly. So I think that to the extent that that the most effective people are ones that lack an effective voice, that makes that sort of problem harder.
Thanks for queuing that up for me, Peter, because I want to talk about those that are flying below the radar on next week's program. But guys, stay with us. On next week's program, it is part one of a two-part series. We will talk to entrepreneurs, select entrepreneurs from throughout the Carolinas, 6 of them to be exact. Zach Painter from Loggerhead Apparel, Wendell Roth from Waterra, Fred Sexton from Mouse and Man, Marty Bauer from Ride Post, Jenny Fulton from Old Orchard Foods, and Peter Gaska from Wild Creations. 6 entrepreneurs right here on this set, a 2-part series about creativity and innovation and what is working and where these green shoots are coming up. We'll find out next week. You know, since 2008, credit unions have enjoyed first the freedom, if you will, from not being part of the dubious reputation of their larger cousins in commercial and business banking, but also their ability to pay their members higher rates on deposits and just plain charge lower costs to borrow. Joining us now is the State Employee Credit Union President and Chief Executive Officer, Jim Blaine. Jim, I've got a whole bunch of questions. Number one, how do you do that? But number two, and before that, is congratulations. You are the nation's 2nd largest credit union. You are 27 billion plus or minus in assets. You have almost 2 million members, and you are growing pretty healthily. How have you done that?
Well, Chris, I always say it's great management, and after the laughter dies down, I confess that it is. We have greater convenience than we have in the past. Our organization now has a branch office in all 100 North Carolina counties, have a very extensive ATM network, and we also have a very vibrant internet and online banking availability. So we're in more communities. People like to know who they're dealing with financially. We do generally have a lower cost delivery system because we do fewer things and try to keep it focused. And we're North Carolina focused. So quicker, better, and cheaper usually works. Pretty good formula for any business. That's what we're striving to do.
You know, here, and I want to ask you this, and I'm not going to probably
you
ask
like
it
the good management
best way. How do you not become not a victim of your success? I don't want to say it that way, but how do you not start to become noticed as you become more successful? Because on the outside, when I described who you are, people say, okay, another big bank heading toward that direction. How do you not become just another? And I know we can't call you this because you're not a bank, but how do you not become another perceived big bank?
We don't act like a big bank. People don't realize the size of the organization, and in fact, they don't care. Been with the organization a long, long time, and as far as I can remember, I have never had anybody come in and say, "How large are you?" and "Are you, expanding?" They've always wanted to talk to me about getting rates up or fees lower, but we've been hiding in plain sight for a long, long time. And I think as long as we keep the personal touch, the community relationship, then we'll be successful. By the way, we do no advertising, never have. It's all word of mouth, and we found that to be the most effective way of building a reputation. You build it by example. You do what you say you're going to do, and you treat people like they want to be treated. Golden rule does work in our organization pretty well.
You sound like an old line banker talking like that.
You keep using that four-letter word with me, Chris. It's your show. You can do what you want. It's all right.
Thank you. Sorry to
But
lose this
now
composure.
I hope you know, though, that many people do confuse credit unions with banks because we do have drive-in windows and branches, and we make loans, and it looks very similar. But in fact, we're the alternative. We are diametrically opposite from a banking organization. First, we're a cooperative, so we're owned by the people that use us. We're not investor-owned. As a banker, if I were a banker, I'd be working hard to extract money from my customers' pockets. As a credit union, our job as a cooperatively owned organization is to leave money in their pockets. So we'd be a very bad banking organization. Wouldn't last long at all.
Russell.
As a not-for-profit, it puts some unique challenges on what you do, and so how do you manage as a not-for-profit? How do you manage the balance between margin versus mission?
It's a great question. It is a conflict, right?
I told you what, I wasn't going to ask you anything personal.
That's right. That's not too personal. That's all right. Mission is always first with our organization. We are an ethics principle-based organization, not a profit-based. So when you're principle-based, I think it resolves a lot of those conflicts, those tensions between making money and doing the appropriate thing for the customer. In a co-op where the member owns the organization, then we actually work for the person we're dealing with. And all our folks are salaried is one way we manage mission. So there's no incentive for any of our employees to try to put a product in one of our members' hands that they don't need. So I think a trusted advisor, somebody that's working on your behalf, and the staff is, our mission statement, by the way, Russell, is do the right thing. And that's a very powerful message, I think, not only to our members and to our employees about how to act and how to deal with a financial situation. When you come down to a tension between mission and profits, you always do what's appropriate. Believe it or not, most of us do know what's right.
That's a great mission statement.
Works for us. And I think makes a huge difference with employees when they know they're empowered to do that. And of course, with our members, they always throw it up in our face saying, you said you're going to do the right thing. So it keeps us in line too.
Peter?
One of the consequences, I guess, of the recession financial crisis we've been through is a real drop in the public's trust of financial institutions generally, but banks in particular, and big banks as a subset of that. Do you think that, or I guess a different way, to what extent do you think that the growth in your credit union and maybe, I guess it's a two-part question. Do you think that maybe you've benefited from some of the lack of trust in banks, you not being a bank? People looking for that for a local kind of, not a big mega bank. And do you see that sort of growth in the credit union sector more generally?
I think there's some of that. If you ask me what is the cause of the financial crisis, I would say two things: dishonest investment bankers and dishonest mortgage brokers. So I think people are looking for a safe harbor when they're doing financial transactions. Over the last couple of years, it seems to me that we have moved from a caveat emptor, buyer beware, to a buyer be damned situation in the financial marketplace. And that is not sustainable over time. You cannot eat the seed corn. You cannot kill the golden goose. So I hope we are coming back to a more rational, fair-minded, free market system in the financial marketplace. But to answer your question, not all bankers did inappropriate things. In fact, it was a very small group. It has been horrible that the entire financial industry has been diminished or demeaned by what's going on. And I hope some of the reaction to that will be a more reasonable, sound, balanced approach to finance, where it is a shared responsibility. If I'm a financial doctor and I misdiagnose your case, then I ought to be held accountable. And that's what being a professional is. And so hopefully the banking industry can recover that very strong professionalism. There's at least one person sitting in this group who is a legacy Wachovian. And Wachovia Bank was the premier banking institution in this state, leader in all the communities, driver economic force at one time. And we need to return to that, where banking is a responsible citizen in our communities. And I feel credit unions have been all along. So I think we're there.
You know, Jim, what percentage of growth in your deposits, in your revenue, in your membership has come from this trust issue that's exploded since 2008 around the banks?
I can't say. I don't know.
Half, a third? I mean, just roughly.
Well,
meaningful amount, I would guess.
Chris, I don't think that's true, and here's why. People are frustrated with what they experience in terms of fees and services at some financial institutions. But we're all apathetic. They rarely change institutions because it's not high on your list of things you need to do today, right? And with direct deposit and drafts and all that, it's a pretty complex thing to do. So it is, you have to have major frustrations to switch your financial institution. And so hopefully that will be good. If it's the large institutions that have failed, then they can go back and reestablish the relationships with their members and charge appropriate fees and offer great service. I think a lot of them in the Carolina areas are working very hard to rebuild that trust. And that will be good for North and South Carolina. You need a strong banking community. It makes so many things happen, whether it's economic growth and development or, helping with training and that sort of thing. So we need that. We need to restore that trust. And North Carolina and South Carolina have got some great community banks for sure, and some very great large regional banks also.
Russell?
How have you seen with the distrust that's emerging and the economic downturn, how have you seen the requirements and accountability you have to your members change? How has that evolved?
The accountability, the responsibility we have, I don't think has changed. That's what a credit union, a cooperative, a member-owned organization has that by definition. But I think I'm sensing that many financial consumers are expecting some prosecutions and some executions in the future if this goes forward. I think it's astounding that such malpractice and mispractice can have gone on, and we can't quite find who's accountable for that. And I think that will be a good trend going forward. I think we should all be held accountable for what we do in our jobs and our profession.
And how do you create that trust within your membership?
In our membership, they have a very powerful tool. We have an annual meeting. Our board, our volunteers are not compensated.
We've got about 15 seconds.
They are elected by our members, and our membership can arrive at the annual meeting and vote us all out if we get out of line. And that's a very good control on the organization.
That's certainly a motivator for you. Jim, thank you for being on the program. We didn't even get to a chance of some of the rehab, foreclosed rehab properties in Durham, North Wilkesboro, and Greenville.
That's correct.
Please come back on the program. Would you do that?
Well, you better wait to see what your ratings are.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, Jim. Good
Thanks
to see
very
you.
much.
Peter, nice to see you again. Thanks for being here.
Pleasure.
Russell, take care. See you soon.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you.
Until next week, I'm Chris Woody, and we hope your weekend is good. Good night.
Major funding for Carolina Business Review was provided by the Duke Endowment, a private foundation enriching communities in the Carolinas through higher education, healthcare, rural churches, and children's services. Blue Cross and Blue Shield of North Carolina. Who's responsible for rising healthcare costs? Join us and many others in a candid discussion at letstalkcost.com. Grant Thornton. Operating in more than 100 countries, our tax, audit, and advisory professionals specialize in helping companies unlock their growth potential. Novant Health, bringing you world-class technology, clinicians, and care, when and where you need it. Sunoco, a global manufacturer of consumer and industrial packaging products and provider of packaging services, with more than 300 operations in 35 countries. Blue Cross and Blue Shield of South Carolina, where healthcare is changing for the better. Find out how at ahealthysc.tv. And by viewers like you. Thank you. Promotional consideration provided by Business North Carolina Magazine. For more information, visit carolinabusinessreview.com.